Okay, so I'd like to officially welcome everyone to tonight's presentation of OTF Connects, which is actually our last OTF Connects presentation of the 2012-2013 academic year. And tonight's session is creating a community of thinkers with Cynthia Nicholson of the Critical Thinking Consortium out in Vancouver, BC. On behalf of Sirius Skurahan, who is the administrator and facilitator of the OTF Connects program, we'd like to thank you for your time and for joining in the session and so much of your participation throughout this year's program. We've seen a lot of you quite frequently, and we do appreciate your participation and for sharing the OTF Connects program with your colleagues and accessing the website. Please do take advantage of that over the course of the summer as well. So we're excited to have Cynthia here, and this topic is certainly one that is applicable to all of us in the various classrooms and settings that we work. And so I will just advance our slide here so that our recording will also capture our demographics for this evening and where we're all located. And now I'm going to hand it over to Cynthia.
Okay, thank you, Louise, and welcome everybody. I am so impressed that you have made it out on a June evening, as I know how busy this time of year is, and I know how tempting it is to be doing other things. So I am very impressed that you've made it to join this session. I think report cards, not to mention a lot of other things like kids' baseball practices and stuff. Anyway, building a community of thinkers, and it looked like most of you were familiar with the TC squared model and approach. And so you probably know that this is one of the fronts for fostering and promoting critical thinking. And it's just such an important one that I'm really glad we're focusing on it here tonight. Now I have to show you where I am. Let me just see if I can get these slides going properly here. Because I knew Louise was going to do that with you. So I had to make a map for myself here because I'm very far away from you, of course. But Bowen Island is where I live. It's just outside of Vancouver. Tried to get that arrow to point to the right place, but it's actually not on that map. But I'm just really glad we can connect this way, even though we are physically, geographically far spread out. What I want to do right off the bat is a little bit of a thought experiment, because I want us to just think about what does a community of thinkers look like? And I think one of the things we hear being talked about these days is visible learning and visible thinking even, and that this is really important to make these things explicit for students. And so what I want to do is pretend that we've all somehow got on a plane and met in Winnipeg, and that we have gone to visit a school where there is some really great thinking going on, and so the school is known for that. And we split up and we go into different classrooms, and then we come back together. And now, Louise, did you want to say something?
Yes. You know what, Cynthia? I thought this might be something that we've encountered here. Do you have a big red edge around the outside of your slide area?
I do.
You do?
That mean
okay. Yes, that means we're not on the same slide as you. We're still on your title
slide.
No. So up above, yeah, and I apologize for that.
So I've been talking about my beautiful map, and you haven't seen it.
Well, for a minute there, I was thinking, Okay, so right above your whiteboard, there's it should be highlighted red, the dual arrow. Right, so if you could click that, so that the red highlighted arrows are not red anymore.
Okay, and now I can
it's
take you to them. There's what I was talking about that time. So sorry. Okay, so there we are. I'm on Bowen Island. I'm a retired elementary teacher. I write kids science books, and I've done quite a bit of work with math and science at the elementary level. And I just have to ask before we go any further, Laura, is this Laura Jenny Newman that's with us? Or is it just another Laura that happens to also be a numeracy coach? Oh, good. Okay, well, welcome. I just have, there's one of our TC Squared facilitators is named Laura, and she's a numeracy consultant in the Peel School District. So I just thought maybe you were her, but I'm glad to welcome you. Yeah, many multi-talented Lauras. Okay, so let's get back to our thought experiment. Sorry about the slide mix-up. So we're going to go to the school, and then we're going to come back together. So this is all, of course, in your imagination. I want you to tell us, when you walked into the classroom you visited, what evidence did you see and what did you hear that told you that there was a lot of thinking going on? So just, be specific. Just use your imagination, or think of your own classroom or another classroom maybe you're aware of. And just what might you see, and also what might you hear? And if you could type it right on the whiteboard here, that will be, so Christine, for instance, anchor charts, wonderful. Can you put that up on the whiteboard just so we get kind of a collage together? Okay, and try to maybe even add a little bit of detail. Like maybe they're talking about, scaredy squirrels, emergency kit, or add a little bit to flesh it out for us. Okay, so Louise, do you think everybody's okay with the text tool?
I'll just check in and see. If anyone's having any problem clicking on that text tool, I guess you could put it in the chat, but try double-clicking on it.
Yeah,
sometimes double-clicking on that text tool helps out.
Yeah, if you can't make the text tool work, definitely put your ideas in the chat. I just thought it'd be nice to see them kind of collected together on the screen here. Okay, so Christine and I'm not sure, is it Martine having trouble with the text tool? So write in the chat, and we'll either just read it from there, or maybe I'll transfer it into the. So I think I'll add the anchor charts. I'm just expanding a bit here. We're getting some great ideas here, so I hope once you've got your own ideas down, have a look at what other people have contributed as well. Okay, we'll wait and we'll give everybody just another few moments. I think we've got lots of really great ideas here. I'm starting to picture a lot of wonderful classrooms. And kids definitely engaged in learning from the sounds of it. You hear some noise going on, you hear some conversation. But it's not just teacher to student or student answering a teacher. So this is great. Okay. So I see people writing, but maybe in the chat box. So if you have more ideas, definitely add them to the chat box. When you've had a chance to read everybody's ideas here, give me a green tick mark and I'll know that we're ready to move on. Okay, I love that I'm seeing the idea of questions and problems and inquiry basically happening. And because the critical inquiry, of course, is such a big part of what we're working on with TC Squared, is how do we get that kind of excitement around learning happening. So I think most people have had a good chance to look at this. I'm going to move to the next slide, but definitely if you would like to say something, I'd love to see your hand up, and you can take the mic or write in the chat box. So let's move along here. I like to, with kids or adults, I think it's important to know what are the big ideas of what we're talking about. So I tried to put together as concisely as I could what the big ideas of this session are. And I think the first one is that we can intentionally nurture a community of thinkers. And I guess part of this that I didn't put in is that it's probably fair to say that a community of thinkers does not happen without intentional nurturing. But I was trying to be positive, so I turned it this way. And then the other part of it is that this whole community of thinkers is not just for its own sake. It really supports students' learning. So all the things you were putting into that collage of our classroom visits really gave a picture of a place where students are actively learning. And when we know without thinking there really is no meaningful learning happening. So that's why we really need the community of thinkers. Now, so we already started talking about what it might look like. One thing that, or the sort of core of the session is going to be 5 ways that TC Squared has identified for building a community of thinkers, so those intentional steps that we can take. And then I've got a little mini case study that we're going to give some advice to a teacher, a wonderful teacher, but she's looking for, in pretending, she's looking for some advice. So at any time, put up a hand, ask a question, but I'll try and keep us moving along here at a fairly good pace. So here are 3 things that I've pulled out thinking about a community of thinkers, and I think this would fit with the examples you were giving, that students need to feel safe and respected. They make thoughtful, reasoned decisions every day, and if you're familiar with TC Squared, you know that is talking about reasoned judgment is relating to the whole idea of using criteria to make a decision. And they share ideas with each other and not just the teacher. And I think somebody, or more than one person, had that in the little collage of ideas from the school. So I'd like you to choose one of those, one that really, that causes you to do some thinking, and share your ideas in this time in the chat box. Just put the letter beside it and then just say, what does that make you think about? Is that something that's easy to do, that you feel you've come a long way in your classroom already with that? Is it something that's challenging for you, maybe with your particular group of students? Or if your job is not with one group, is it hard to make this happen with different groups throughout the day and the week? So we'll give you a chance to write in the chat box now. Now, Louise, I'm not seeing anything coming up in my chat box, and I'm wondering if I should be, or if people are all still writing.
That is a very good point. I'm just going to see if I could. I'm
not there now. I'm seeing things.
Okay.
No, now I'm seeing things come. Okay.
All right. I just pinned my chat just in case, because I hadn't been seeing any either. So if it does seem unusual to have very little text going by in the chat, you can always try that.
What did you do? You just
I refer to it as pinning and unpinning, but if you hold your mouse down on the title bar of the chat box,
okay,
you can actually pull that chat box off to the side and move it around just like you do other windows on your computer. And then you can stretch it and make it bigger so you can see a little bit more at once. And sometimes if your chat freezes, either pulling it out of your interface or dragging it back in will unfreeze it.
Okay, well now I'm seeing some comments coming up from Christine and Kathy and Martine and Sonia. Yeah, and so once you've written a comment, if you can have a chance to scroll through the chat box, and if you're having trouble seeing it, you probably heard what Louise just was telling me. Oh, sorry that Janice is not able to continue with us.
Yeah, I'll maybe connect with her via email and see if we can sort out what the root of that problem was tonight.
That's too bad. But I'm seeing some interesting comments here about just the reality in the classroom. I mean, things sound great in theory, but how do we make it really happen in the classroom when we have kids who want to play or kids who want to please the teacher with their comments? So great. I see Laura's still writing, Kathy, and anybody who wants to add to this or respond to anybody else's comment. But I would be very happy if somebody would like to also take the mic here. Kathy, do you want to grab the mic and say what you mean by socialize, 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 how that came up or got triggered for you? You want to try your mic? Okay, I don't know who's got mics set up, so I guess I'll just leave it up to you to just join in, put your hand up, or just activate your mic if you have a question. So we know that these things, we want to have them happening, but of course this gets back to our key idea that we need to be intentional about fostering this and having it happen, and that community, yes, is definitely shared and social, and we know that learning is social, so that's why it's so important. This quote I use sometimes in other critical thinking workshops to show that, skillful thinking must be cultivated, and I think we can extrapolate from this and say communities of thinkers must be cultivated. They just don't happen automatically. This is another book called The Thinking Classroom, a lot of work done down in Harvard with a group called Project Zero, and they talk about a culture of thinking. So I thought this idea about musical skills was a good one, because we sometimes think, oh, some kids just are musical and some aren't, or artistic or mathematical or whatever. And this whole idea that we need to have not just direct teaching, whatever that might entail, but this whole idea of creating a culture that supports these things. So, so here, now we're going to move into what can we do? What are these steps we can do? And these are 5 things. Of course, they overlap. They're not exclusive. They kind of overlap and weave together, and they're not all there is. There's lots of other ideas, and I know you've probably been using some, so I'm hoping you'll share as we go along. First one on our list is classroom expectations. Just what do kids know that they are expected to do? How are they expected to behave? What's expected to happen in the classroom? And then closely related to that is the idea of having routines and activities that will support those expectations happening. So I know for myself, routines I often felt saved me from utter burnout, because it was the routines that would keep the day going and would get established and would help make those sharing times and so on really work. So, and Kathy, yeah, the kids reflect that culture we're creating. Modeling, personally modeling is an important one, and this is a big part of TC Squared. I mean, whenever we do a workshop, we're trying to model this whole idea of asking questions, getting people to make decisions, and back them up with evidence and reasons. Shaping communication, of course, is really important, and I know lots of you probably have English language learners in your classrooms, or just kids who are not very verbal. And the idea that we nurture that we don't, of course, give up on them or just hope that it will happen outside of our classroom, but we actually are very focused on providing opportunities to nurture that communication. And then also looking at other kinds of tools for student participation in a reflective community. So we're going to look at each of these fairly quickly, but definitely having a closer look at each one. So setting appropriate classroom expectations, all of these things on this list are good things, good expectations to have. But what I'm going to ask you to do is pick out the 3 that you think would be the most effective if you're focusing on a community of thinkers. So you're going beyond the sort of community of learners idea into the community of thinkers. So take a moment to read through, and I think because we're a fairly small group, we can use the stickies that you used on the map to put beside the 3 that you picked. Okay? Okay, that's right, like the star. And you can put them on either side of the comments. Okay, now we seem to have some clustering around the last 2 there, giving evidence and reasoning and listening to each other's ideas. And Louise, you lost your power, and I'm glad to see you're back. We're having a bit of a challenge with technology tonight, but oh well, that's to be expected. So I'm seeing a couple of people have picked to treat each other with respect, disagree with ideas, not people, and maybe those two tie pretty closely together. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to pick 3. We'll just give you another moment to maybe put one more on. I'm curious that nobody has picked B, and I'm wondering if anybody considered picking B. My notes are not saying, oh, they're not staying, Christine, where you put them? That's an extra challenge. Okay, well, maybe just write in the chat box where you just put the letters of the, yeah, we're just really having, okay. Well, I think we can see that there's lots of expectations that are good, that just are necessary to have a functioning class. But there are some that are particularly conducive to really creating the expectation that, and to really get that thinking culture happening, culture of thinking. So for me, I mean, I think all of these ones that you've chosen definitely are important. I think for the TC squared point of view, I guess F, that evidence and reasoning to support conclusions, would kind of be at the core. But the other ones are all important as well. And I think the reason I drew your attention to making up our own minds is it kind of reminded me of the trying to say what the teacher wants you to say, which came up in our original brainstorming there, that kids are trying to please the teacher. They're not thinking, well, what do I think makes sense? So I think getting that expectation about, well, you know, you need to make up your own mind about this. It's not your friend's opinion. It's not my opinion. It's your well thought through opinion. Okay, let's keep moving here and hope our technology helps us. So the second thing was actually taking, so I picked 3 here. These are not, this is not saying these were the right answers, but here are 3 of those that did get some support, especially the second and third one. And these are the routines and activities that could support those expectations happening. So I'm going to ask you again to either write directly on the whiteboard, which would be kind of ideal so that we can all see it all in one place. But if the whiteboard writing isn't working for you, and here I am at home pointing to it, I know you can't see me pointing. If it's not working for you, do it right in the chat box. But if I put in one idea just to get us going, but can we take just a minute or two to come up with some other ideas for supportive routines, maybe going back to what we saw in that imaginary school visit we did. Wow, I'm so impressed with the ideas you people are coming up with here. I just want everybody to have a chance to appreciate what other people have written. And I think they're all very much ideas that would support the classroom community. And I think some of them, I'm a little curious about a couple of things. I'm just not sure. Would the person who said using talk spot cards explain that? Oh, and I see Kathy's asked the same question. What are talk box cards? Because that sounds really interesting. Not sure who wrote that, so I can't ask you directly. Christine, and do you have a microphone? That's what she would type. Oh, please, Christine, no? Okay, well, if you type, we will be interested in seeing what you say. But I think all of these ideas about getting ideas out in the open, disagreeing with ideas and not people is a tricky one, because sometimes we want to say, this is, I'm thinking of math, for instance, where kids use different strategies to solve a problem, and we want to say this is Sam's strategy, and this is Liam's strategy, and this is Clara's strategy. But sometimes I think we have to be careful with that. As much as we want students to have ownership of their ideas, we also want to focus on ideas and not personalities sometimes. So that's one we have to balance. So, okay, Christine, are you telling us about talk boxes in the... We're not going to let you off the hook here, Christine. You have to either type it or Christine's typing. So I'll move us along, but we'll be watching the chat box. So great ideas there. Now let's look at the third one, which is the modeling. And this is something that I know has been really brought into people's awareness, I think, a lot in literacy, things that I've used and heard about with modeling, making connections between yourself and the text, and questioning the text, and so on. So modeling the attributes of a good critical thinker, we kind of have to think, well, what are those attributes, and then how might you model them? But if you could think about this is a scene, this is the student teacher I had and some of the kids in my class. And we're very lucky on Bowen Island. We can go out behind the school and be on a wonderful trail. And I just wonder, from this picture, does it make you think of some attributes of a critical thinker that this teacher in this situation could be modeling? And I think, again, try and write on the whiteboard if you can, but use the chat box if you can't. And I'm just going to read some of the things in the chat box while you get started on that. Okay. Yes, definitely active listening to other people and focusing on them while you're listening, asking a clarifying question perhaps. I'm wondering how people are doing with ideas here. One thing I noticed in this, when I look at this picture, and of course I guess I took this picture, but the students are gathering some sort of information, and the idea here is that the teacher is modeling the idea of of looking for evidence and listening for reasons rather than making quick decisions. So that whole idea of carefully considered judgments and so on is a important thing. I'm going to move us along to the next slide because it's still about this modeling idea, but back with our expectations, and then we had some good ideas for the routines and activities. But I gave us an example here of just how might a teacher model any of these expectations in the classroom. So my example was, rather than just saying we're going on this field trip, actually going through the criteria that you use, which you do use, and Usha James, who does a lot of facilitating for TC Squared and is at the University of Toronto, so some of you might know her. I love the way she says, teaching is a thinking profession, and it's true. We are always using critical thinking as teachers, but we don't always remember to make that evident to kids. So are there any other things that you do in the course of a day that, if you remember, you would model for your students, that it took you some critical thinking to get to that decision or to learn something? Okay. Okay, so we've got the idea of throwing something back to the class rather than just giving our teacher answers, which is often so tempting to do because there's so much we are trying to do in a day. I think sometimes we think that will just be so much faster. But the idea of throwing something back to the class and asking them for ideas is a great one. So somebody does a lot of thinking aloud. Somebody is kind of like reading aloud and not reading silently anymore. Well, I guess it can get to the point where we feel we're overdoing it, but I think, and maybe this is just me, but I know that it was something that I would forget to do quite a bit. And I'm looking in the chat box as well. We've got some comments here as well. Kathy, did we already figure out that you don't have a microphone? Maybe, because I think that would be interesting to hear a bit more about out-of-the-box decisions. But I think, yeah, kids are interested when we tell them how. Now, one of the teachers who sometimes works with TC Squared out here in BC, Stefan Stipp, he did with his high school students a wonderful project because he found they weren't buying into this idea, all this work they were putting into critical thinking. They weren't really seeing that it was worthwhile. So he asked them to help him choose his next car. And Stefan's about 6'5" or something, so his being able to fit in the car was one of the criteria, but then he also has
Hi guys, I'm going to jump on. I'm pretty sure that we've just got a sound delay for Cynthia and then it's going to catch up. And we'll get the chipmunk Cynthia again. Oh, Cynthia was good.
So Louise, should I see I went out and in again?
Yes, you got booted. I'm so glad you're back, though.
Yes, I'm glad I'm back, too. Should I repeat anything I said, or should I just carry on?
Let's see, where were you?
Did you hear about Stefan and the car decision?
That's right. You were just starting to share Stefan's story, so maybe you could finish that one.
Okay. Okay, well, I won't expand on the whole story, but if anybody's interested, it's in our Stories from the Classroom collection on the TC Squared website. And basically, Stefan is a very tall high school teacher, and he got his classes helping him make his decision about buying a new car that would fit him, fit his family, be good on gas. You know, all the criteria were laid out, and it really helped them see that this wasn't just some academic thing they were going through. This was a real life skill, being able to be a critical thinker and use criteria and make reasoned judgments. So that was one instance of modeling. And I know there's a school in Ontario, and I've forgotten the name of the school, unfortunately, but their principal, Andrea Williams, had the whole school helping her pick a new car. So I think, you know, there's things that, I mean, those are big things, but you can take in little things from your life as well that are, of course, not too personal, but things that you want to use that model that for kids, that this is something that we can really use in our lives outside of school. I'm going to move us along here to this one because I think this is kind of an interesting one. This is from an article that was in a social studies collection, and I thought, yeah, some of these do pop up, and when we look through them, I think we've kind of hit on a few of these ideas, so I'm not going to spend time looking at these by themselves, but I'm going to ask you to think about how could we reframe these points so that they are pillars of successful discussion. So we're just focusing right now on the communication part of the whole community. If there's one of those that you feel you've been particularly concerned with and you've been working on, if you could write in the chat box this time and just put the letter and just turn it into a positive. I think this whole idea of reframing is a really important one to practice. So how would we turn it? For instance, a tendency for teachers to talk too much. What would be a pillar of successful discussion in a classroom? How would you word that one? But pick one. Everybody pick one and try to reframe it. Let's see how we do. Louise, is my sound working okay now?
Yes, I can hear you fine. I think everybody's got their thinking caps on here.
Yeah, good. This is a great thinking group. I'm so impressed. So if everybody's following along in the chat box, we've got some good reframings of these kind of issues or impediments, and thinking about, okay, well, what do we do that gets away from this? So the idea of encouraging classmates, and I think this one kind of would hit on more than one of these, this whole idea of asking, getting other students to ask questions that follow up for clarification. I think that also helps us with the tendency for teachers to talk too much. Popsicle sticks, and so just the random idea of randomly calling on people, not waiting for those 4 or 5 hands to go up. Christine, is that I think is what you're getting at there with, and that D, the unequal participation of students. So those strategies are really important, and sometimes I know, you use one for a while and then it becomes kind of old and doesn't work so well, so you switch. But yeah, just that idea of a random way of calling on people. And student-to-student discussion, again, this seems to hit on the A that Laura's identified, teachers talking too much, but I think it also probably connects to the others in that I think the unequal participation can often be helped by having kids turn to each other and talk before they have to talk to the whole class. I'm reading about asking questions and having students contribute comments. Sonia, this is interesting about having a SMART goal yourself that you shared with the class. Nice, nice. So that brings us back to the modeling as well as, yeah, as well as your own goal. And Louise is reminding us of Twitter. And this has given us a nice, for kids, older kids anyway. I'm not sure how much younger ones are aware of Twitter, but the whole idea of 140 characters as having to say something in a concise way. And yeah, this whole thing with the 3 or 4. Louise, did you want to talk?
I was just going to say, at the elementary level, I've seen people use Post-it notes, but I was thinking though that this about communication that could be written communication or picture communication, but if you start with like a little piece of paper, they can only fit so much on it, so they have to be really careful about what they're choosing to share.
Yes, yes, that's and sometimes and there's a phrase, and I don't know where it originated, but it's called enabling constraints. And if you think about it, it sounds like sort of an oxymoron, enabling constraints. But often, if you can structure something so that the framework is tighter, it opens up all sorts of opportunities and just opens up ideas and being able to share and not being overwhelmed by a huge, vague sort of task. So that would be probably something that we could discuss at length, but we'll keep going here. And I think that same 3 or 7 students, I know that for myself as a teacher, I sometimes let that make me think everybody got it, whatever it was, when really, if I had been sitting at the back of the classroom and watching the guys who were playing with their little torn pieces of paper making some sort of army or something, I might have realized that no, they weren't getting it at all, and I couldn't just go by the feedback from the keeners. So, and wait time, Laura, of course, really important. And yep, bring in those critical challenges. So the critical challenges, of course, are those questions that do invite discussion and do support with criteria, giving students language and structure to support that discussion. Yeah, elbow partners, small group, lots of great ideas here. And as a class, take, and yes, Martine, that responsibility that we're all going to encourage each other. So that's awesome. Okay, we have great ideas, and I'm so impressed with this group for sharing. Oh, this is something I just came upon recently, and I don't know if it's been around for a long time. I found it in this book about coaching, working, professional development kind of coaching, but I think it fits for in any teaching situation. It's just wait and see, asking yourself, why am I talking? And then saying, stop explaining everything. So I thought that was kind of catchy. Oh, by the way, we didn't mention this at the beginning, but I will send a PDF of key slides, not the whole thing, but key slides. I'll send it to Louise, and she will get it to you one way or another, I think, on the website. That worked last time, Louise, right?
Yes,
okay.
That would be perfect. Thanks, Cynthia.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so here's for those, and it sounded like I think most people were familiar with the TC² model, and I've highlighted community of thinkers, and I kind of feel like sometimes it's up there, kind of shoved into the corner, where it might almost come right into the middle. I think it could be a really different way to look at it. But the next point on the last point on our ways to promote this was the idea of tools. And Sonia, yeah, I think you brought up a good point there. There's ways to develop student thinking by showing them good examples and non-examples that they can really see, and then develop the criteria that way. Okay, so I'm just going to move us to the next slide because it just focuses on those TC², oops, went too far, sorry, TC² tools. And, I think we can probably think of how every one of these tools would be helpful. It's hard for students to discuss something if they don't have the background knowledge. And one thing I've really learned from TC² is how much background knowledge can be gained from images. And I think that's so important when we have English language learners or younger students. The image itself can create and provide a lot of background knowledge for the discussion, for the interactions. We've talked a bit about criteria for judgment. So if there are clear criteria, students not only have those ideas, they have the language that goes with them. And that is really helpful for promoting discussion. And also for the critical thinking vocabulary, that's not, it sounds like it's just the words, but it's really important concepts such as, taking a different point of view, or being able to say, let's see, I'm kind of drawing a little bit of a blank right here, but the whole idea of, well, I think that's biased, or I think that is, you need more evidence for that. All those kinds of words and concepts that go with them. The thinking strategies are another really key part of this whole approach, and I think that's where we could get into some of the ways of supporting discussion with things like strategies for active listening, for instance, actual things that you can do, and if you were, interviewing somebody or asking a powerful question, all those kind of strategies are helpful. And then, of course, the habits of mind, and I think we've already touched on that with this whole idea of a culture where you're expecting to respect other people's ideas, and you're expecting to share your ideas and make up your own mind. So I am going to just mention here, and I'm not sure what your access is, but I imagine if you've had some connection with TC², you might have a district or school subscription to the resources. And if not, maybe you can ask if you can get it. So for younger students, so primary to me means grades K to 3. And I know it's a little different out there. So these are some resources that you could look at for very good provision of tools for discussion and for participation in the community of thinkers. The thoughtful books are they're free anyway, and if you don't have a subscription, you could find them under the literacy teaching resources. The critical challenges all have a tool or a a question plus then some sort of a thinking strategy or tool combined with that, and suggestions for criteria. And the source docs are new and they're just being built up, but there are picture sets there that would be very suitable for primary if you can, either have a projector or a smart board or whatever and show these images. And there are suggestions for how to use them. Yeah, the thoughtful books are free online. Now the books are books that are probably in your school library. The thoughtful books are the teaching guides that go with them, and they have blackline masters for student work and so on. So they're very, very helpful and very well put together. Intermediate, again, critical challenges, and I just thought I'd mention some of the specific tools for thought, and I think these have kind of been coming up. The active listening, the responsive questions, finding another perspective, being independent-minded, those are all would be really helpful with older students all the way up through high school as far as building the tools that students can use for participating in a community of thinkers. Now, Louise has given you some links there, but don't go on them quite yet because I need you to think about this teacher that we're going to meet in a video. I'm just checking our time here. I think we're good. So we're going to watch a video, and we're going to watch a video. A lovely teacher. She's a grade 8 math teacher, and I'm just going to say, please don't let that throw you off in any way. We're not looking at the math so much. We're looking at how might she go beyond what she's already doing, some interesting things, and she mentioned some key points. But what could she do to go even further? And I know you people have lots of good ideas. So when we watch this, it's 5 minutes. So you might want to have a piece of paper and just scribble down a couple of things. And then we're going to come back to this slide and we're going to say, what did you notice that was working well? What did she say or do? The whole idea, what did we observe that seemed to be working well to promote this community, thinking community? And then can we think of some things that we might suggest to her? And in the way of, and respectfully, of course, if we were talking to her, have you tried this? Or what about that? You might think about this. So before we go to the video, Louise, you're going to kind of tell us what's going to happen here, right?
Yes, I'm just going to switch over to the web tour function here, folks, and I'll drop a link in, and when I hit enter, YouTube is going to come up in your whiteboard space there, and the video should start to play automatically. If it doesn't, just go ahead and click the play button. You may find that the volume comes up really loud. If your volume is already set fairly high on your computer, YouTube's volume does tend to be louder than your general volume. If you have any issues with the web tour not showing up, I'm also posting the link in the chat, and when you're finished the video, if you could give us a green check mark, then we'll know you're done. Thanks, everyone.
So if people are going to give us a green check mark when they get back into the main room. And Louise, can I get back to that previous slide? Can I just click? Ah, great, great, great. Okay, well, if we can get some ideas down, I hope you saw something there that you thought was good and was working well, and then maybe got triggered some ideas of things that we could suggest. So again, try to get it on the whiteboard. If it doesn't fit on the whiteboard or you can't get that working, put it in the chat box. And let's try to be quite specific about the strategies she's using so that we can then focus on, well, what strategies might you use? We've got somebody doing some freehand work here. That's going to be tricky, right? But I see we're picking up on a lot of the things that are the engagement with the students and the teacher, of course, you know, being motivated to really know what her students are thinking, and I think the kids are picking up on that, of course. I think my favorite, no, yeah, it is a catchy phrase, and it's because it kind of puts those two very different ideas together. And yeah, so lots of good stuff we saw happening, and I think we've got some very good suggestions coming in as well about what she could maybe do to just bump up that that thinking component for all the kids. And she does mention a third of the class put up their hands, and you know, maybe in a math class at that level, typically that would be, you know, that would be a lot of kids. Maybe there's a way of making it even more broad participation. So we've got some good ideas here about that. If anybody sees an idea that they think, you know, they really like, and it wasn't, and whether it was your own idea or not, you could do a little sticky, you know, star or check mark or whatever, just to kind of say, yeah, I like that idea, or thanks for sharing that. Yeah, low risk engagement's a nice way of putting it. And oh yeah, we had some trouble with the stickers. I forgot they kind of bounced around. Well, that's okay. I liked, one thing I like, I'm just going to throw this in, and I don't think I see it here. The whole idea of when she said, convince me, you know, that was a really good critical thinking kind of prompt, I think, that she was giving to the kids. you know, it wasn't just, okay, that's what you said and I'm going to tell you it's right. It was convince me, and that, I think that was like a key thing. And she was really talking about dialogue rather than teacher telling. Although we've got some ideas here that we could even expand on that. I think letting students lead the discussion, having them talk in small groups first and then share, I think is always going to spread and enhance the participation. Yeah, she's giving positive feedback to the students, but and I'm not, I can't read that whole, so pull that down. Terrific thinking, yeah. Yeah. No, she seems to have a nice relationship with them, but I think being really specific about what they're doing well is always going to help instead. And we have to be so careful with just empty praise. We always want to be talking about what is it that's good about what they're doing. Yeah, and not so much an emphasis on right and wrong, although, but getting into the idea of understanding and what, you know, the whole idea, how might you help this other student, you know, to understand. Because, you know, when she's talking about multiplying a negative by a negative, it was kind of a little bit of the feeling like, well, they either just remember it or they don't. But I think what I'm seeing here in your comments is getting at that idea of understanding, and how can we get students to think about how that might work. And allowing students to pick would be interesting too, especially if, you know, she's sort of set them up for what are the criteria for a favorite? No, it has to be partly right at least, and so on. So yeah, and bringing in some real world problems instead of operations. Now we only are seeing, of course, that one little snapshot, although it did sound like it was typically a quick activity that she did as a routine. Yeah, the whole idea that mistakes are to learn from, and I think we've got some comments in the chat box about that. Yeah, there has to be a potential for mistakes. And yeah, it's all about the idea and the person. They don't even know who the person is. So very, very, very important points that you're bringing out here. So it's that thinking about their thinking, that whole metacognitive idea, I think she's getting at. I think, you know, and I think she could, like all of us, keep bumping it up and improving, but definitely, definitely. And Martine's got a suggestion in the chat box there. I think what I'm seeing from your suggestions is this whole idea of putting more onto the students, and definitely that is, I think, where we're going with critical inquiry, with students taking more of a role in self-regulation and in self-assessment, peer feedback, and all those things that are happening. I think all of these comments you're making are really saying, let's get students to take that responsibility and take that ownership. And we can support them in doing that with the kinds of things we've been talking about. Okay, yeah, it ends up being a bit of a concept attainment kind of an exercise. Yeah, very nice. Nice. Oh, you guys have so many good ideas. Okay, well let's just, yeah, our time is almost up, so I'm going to move us off from that slide and from the video, and I'm going to skip over this one. So this is just a little summary, and I'll definitely send this to you. And these are 5 really useful ways to foster a community of thinkers. And as we've seen, they're not you know, exclusive from each other. They do blend together, and definitely blend in with the other parts of the TC squared model, or critical thinking, critical inquiry, and all of those kind of directions we're going, I think, now in teaching, which is what makes it exciting. Yeah, and yeah. So I'm going to move us on, but we've got lots of great ideas in the chat box. If you have time, you can continue to read them. I just wanted to share one little story with you that really made me aware of this whole idea of nurturing the community of thinkers. I was teaching grade 4-5, and we were buddies with a grade 1 class, and it was the class of a teacher that I'd worked with for quite a few years. And her name is Yvonne Woodhouse. She's retired now. And she did her teacher training in England, where she grew up. And I just always thought she was a real master teacher. There were things about her way of working with the kids and so on that just seemed so empowering for her students. And one day we were going to go and have our session together after lunch, and she had to make a phone call, and you all know what that's like. She said to me, I've got to make this call. You're going to go into my class, so they'll be okay. Just go in with your kids, and I'll get there as soon as I can. So I went back to my classroom, got my kind of rowdy, rambunctious group organized, did attendance and so on, walked down the hall, and all the time I was thinking, oh, those poor little grade 1s are on their own all this time because it took a few minutes. What are we going to find when we get there? So we get to the door of the grade 1 class, and of course my kids are all bumping into each other as the one comes to a stop. And they weren't on the carpet where I expected to see them maybe sitting in a circle. But I looked around, and there they were all gathered around the Lego table. And the shorter kids were in the front, and the taller kids were in the back. And one little boy was explaining something about the construction that he and his friends had made that morning. And another student was kind of being the facilitator and then asking who had any questions. And the questions were things like, I really like that tower. Could you tell us a little more about how you made it so strong? And there was another one along those lines of what made you decide to make a tunnel there? And it was like, I think my students and I probably were standing there with our mouths open. It was just so amazing, just the way those students were interacting. It was grade 1s. Now, this was in the spring, and then when the teacher came in, Yvonne came in and said, oh, is everything okay? I said, well, we are just so impressed. You have a wonderful class here. And of course, she kind of looked at me and whispered aside, you don't know how much work it's been to get to this point. And I think, this is kind of the theme of our session here has been, yes, it's a really important thing, but it does take that intentional work and strategies to get there. But the payoff is huge, and that was just for me a real eye-opener to the payoff that can happen when you do train and teach and bring students along into that kind of working as a community. So back to those big ideas, we can intentionally nurture a community of thinkers, and that is so important because this culture of thinking really supports student learning. So I am going to stop talking now and wish you all a wonderful, wonderful summer. It's exciting that this is the last session, and I do really commend you for coming out on or tuning in, I guess, on a June evening. So thank you for all your wonderful ideas as well. I think they were very, very, oh, Kathy, you're retiring, but you're still interested, it seems. So that's wonderful. Well, share your great ideas with other people, I hope, other teachers. Yeah, well, great. I mean, I retired 4 years ago, and I still am very involved, as you can tell. So thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the evening and just a great summer.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. That was a really fun session. I enjoyed that, and I hope all of you guys did as well. And Oh, and thank you, Sonia. You're welcome. OTF is very happy to be able to provide this for teachers. It is, fun and easy to access, and not too much of a chunk out of your time. So we appreciate that you've been taking advantage of this. And keep your eye on the website in September, and we'll send you an email shortly. Actually, you're going to get an email asking for some additional feedback for ideas for next year. And don't forget, over the course of the summer, to still visit the OTF Connects resources page, where all the sessions that we've had are all recorded there. And there's a nice chart. Actually, let me go and grab that particular page for you guys, and I'll drop that in the chat. And this particular session recording will be posted on the OTF Connect site by tomorrow, and you'll get a follow-up email as well that lets you know that it's there, and all the different links and cool things that we shared will be included on that page as well. So, but the email itself, you can forward to your colleagues, get them going on here as well. I'm just typing and talking there. There's the resources page link, and there are quite a number of critical thinking sessions there, including a couple of others, at least one other, if I'm correct, Cynthia, that you presented. And you'll note the critical thinking sessions because all of the facilitator names on that resource page will have the TC squared following their name. And of course, we do have some other critical thinking sessions that are other Ontario teachers presented for us as well as a whole ton of other topics. So thank you very much. And the last thing I'm going to ask you to do is to click on the big orange link right in the center of the whiteboard. That is a link you can click on, and I'll drop that in the chat as well. And that is our feedback. So this is our last feedback page of the year. So please do click on that and give us your thoughts. It only takes a moment or so. And we look forward to seeing you again in the fall. So thank you, everyone, and have a safe and wonderful summer.